Now we go to the last section of this chapter about the Islamic world or Islamic empire, and we will talk about the Islamic cultural legacy, and we will combine two lessons here. The first one is about science and philosophy, and the other half is about architecture, the arts, and literature. Now we go to our textbooks or go to Loda USD website, and from there Clever, and from Clever Cengage Learning, and that is our National Geographic book. And from there you want to go to Unit 1, Chapter 3, and we are doing Section 3. This chapter's essential question is, what major contributions did Muslim leaders and scholars make to world civilization? And this section will answer that question. Okay, let's start with 3.1, Science and Philosophy. So this lesson's objective is to describe how, under the leadership of Muslim dynasties, science and philosophy made important advances that spread across the world. Let's go to the review and assess questions. So for number 1, reading check. How did Muslim scholars advance the practice of medicine? Now for number 2, make generalizations. How did the study of the stars aid Muslim in practice of their religion? And for number 3, make connections. What is one way in which your life has been affected by the work of medieval Muslim scholars? Now, what are the Muslim advancements of medicine? So here are the following. Number 1, translations. So in the 7th century, Arab and Persian scholars began translating medical texts from Greek, Syriac, Sanskrit, and Pahlavi into Arabic, and from Arabic to Latin, thus saving those texts from disappearing entirely. In other words, these translations were eventually used by medical scientists in Europe, and eventually that spread around the world. So during the 8th century in Baghdad, Islam scholars and doctors translated the works of the Roman doctor Galen, as well as the Persian and Indian medical texts. So these are the books that were eventually used by many doctors for many years, until eventually they were able to develop, improve all those existing theories and experiments that were conducted in the past. And this was possible because of the Muslim translations of these medical texts. What else? Islamic hospitals pioneered the use of antiseptics, such as alcohol, vinegar, or rose water in cleaning wounds. Everything was to be kept as clean as possible, in stark contrast to the near total lack of sanitation and cleanliness in Christian lands at the time, so in medieval Europe, for example. Muslim doctors were familiar with the use of opium and anesthetic during long surgeries and for extracting teeth. Islamic medicine recognized that some diseases were infectious, including leprosy, smallpox, and sexually transmitted diseases. To this, the great Islamic doctor Avicenna added tuberculosis and described how contagious diseases spread. He also suggested the need for quarantine, or to isolate the person with these contagious diseases. Furthermore, in the 10th century, Arabic doctor al-Sarawi established the basis of surgery in Al-Andalus in Cordova, modern-day Spain, where he worked as a doctor for Caliph al-Hakam II. He wrote a great medical treatise, the Kitab al-Tasrif, a 30-volume book of medicine and surgery. Al-Sarawi invented over 200 medical instruments, many of which are still used today, including forceps, scalpel, surgical needle and retractor, spatula, and catgut sutures. And finally, Islamic pharmacies called Saydalas began at the same time as the hospitals in the late 700s as part of the Islamic healthcare system. While Western pharmacies sold ground mummies, dried dung, and other strange substances, as well as herbs and spices, Muslim pharmacists focus on empiricism. They use substance that showed a positive effect on the patient. In other words, if an herb, a spice, or other ingredient worked by assisting a sick person to heal, it was used. As Islamic pharmacology evolved, the great Muslim doctors like Al-Razi, Avicenna, and Al-Kindi discovered many healing substances for their pharmacies. Now let's take a look at their achievements in terms of mathematics and astronomy or science in general. So Muslim made important advances in the field of science, specifically in astronomy. They measured the size of the earth and studied the sun, moon, and stars. So they used this in order for them to be guided in their religious practice, such as the need or the requirement for every Muslim to pray 5 times a day facing the direction of Mecca. So all this requires knowledge in astronomy. A lot of these achievements or advancements were eventually used in the development of many Western European civilizations, especially in the age of science and in the age of exploration. A lot of the tools that they developed were eventually used in the advancement and development of different disciplines or fields in science. Now, to summarize Lesson 3.1, Muslim scholars collected and organized medical information into reference books and spread the best known medical practices throughout the world. They pioneered surgical procedures and invented surgical instruments. Muslims also used the study of astronomy to determine the time for prayer and religious celebrations. Now let's go to lesson 3.3. So the objective of this lesson is to describe how medieval Muslim dynasties produced distinctive forms of architecture, art, and writing that are highly admired today. Medieval Muslim dynasties produced distinctive forms of architecture, arts, and literature. So this lesson will describe some of this highly admired contribution of the Muslim dynasties made in these areas. Now let's take a look at the review and assess questions. For number 1 reading check, what is a distinctive feature of the exterior architecture of a typical mosque? And number 2, draw conclusions. Would you expect to find statues in a mosque? Why or why not? And number 3, evaluate. What qualities of Muslim architecture and art do you find most appealing? Islamic architecture can be found primarily in Arab states and Muslim majority countries around the world, as well as in European countries with Arab or Islamic history, such as Spain and Portugal, Al-Andalus. Some of its key elements include geometric designs, pointed arches, and domes. Now let's go straight to the key characteristics of Islamic architecture. Minarets. So minarets are towering spires with interior staircases and small windows. They are striking to look at and serve as an integral function, calling Muslims to prayer 5 times a day. What else? Domes. Islamic architecture features domes placed on structure called pendatives that make it possible to fit a round dome on a rectangular or square room. Pendatives are often decorated with mosaic tiling. They have arches in a variety of shapes. Sometimes it's in horseshoe or a keyhole, pointed even, or sometimes scalloped. They are multicolored. Arches are common in Islamic architecture. They also have ornamental designs or decorations. It often includes multicolored mosaic tile featuring repeated patterns and geometric or vegetal motifs and patterns, such as the arabesque. It is also typical to include the use of Arabic calligraphy scripts. These are the letters or handwriting in Arabic form, such as passages from their holy book, the Quran. Another striking feature of masarivia or wood lattice work that is used on windows for privacy and climate control. It also sometimes used in modern contexts as a purely decorative element or option for dividing interior spaces. Other decorative elements of Islamic design include wall paintings, stucco sculpture, and wall panels and decorative woodwork. Islamic architecture often feature gardens, walled interior courtyards, open halls with roof held up by columns and vaulting. And this is because of the nature of the environment where many Muslim civilization started and flourished. And most of the time, it's in a place where the temperature can go so high, and it's often in the desert. So obviously, they have to make the design adaptations. Okay, let's talk about Muslim literature. Let's talk about one of the most popular or influential poet or literary figure of the Muslim culture or civilization. His name is Omar Khayyam. Omar was born in Persia in 1048. He was a mathematician, an astronomer, and a poet. In his own country and time, he was well known for his scientific achievements. In the West, he is best known for the poem. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam is one of the most popular. So this poem is a collection of Khayyam's quatrains. In the verses, the poet discusses eternity, the uncertainty of life, and the fleeting beauty of material world. Omar Khayyam's contemporaries took no notice of his poetry. His quatrains were finally published under his name more than 200 years after his death in 1131, which is almost always the case for many great historical figures, especially artists and scientists, that they get the attention and recognition they deserve long after they're gone. So let's summarize. The Islamic mosques are topped by large dome and have one or more minarets, and they are full of decorations and patterns that we can see in nature. Statues would not be found in a mosque because Muslim artists do not portray people or animals. According to an interpretation of Quran, doing so would imitate God's act of creation and might encourage the worship of images instead of worshiping the one true God for them, which is Allah. Okay, so that is our section 3 lesson, Islamic Cultural Legacy, combining lesson 1 and 3 about science and philosophy. And we also talk about architecture, the arts, and literature. Go ahead, answer the review and assess questions. Thank you.